The world's biggest food company, Nestle, has been accused of failing to carry out basic checks on its cocoa supply chain, where child labour and abuse are widespread. The Fair Labour Association, who were hired by Nestle, tracked the journey of cocoa from the poorest and most remote farms to the exporters who sold directly to Nestle. The company says it will carry out the association's recommendations. Our World Affairs correspondent, Humphrey Hawksley, reports.
For years, this has been a sad but familiar scene in the Ivory Coast. Children hack at pods of cocoa for the chocolate companies, in an industry worth more than £60 billion a year. Last November, they told me they barely got paid, and untreated machete injuries are common. Many children are separated from their families and work far away from home.
My father sent me here to work. I haven't seen my family for 3 years.
The big household name chocolate companies buy cocoa that comes from places like this. Last year, Nestle commissioned an independent auditor to find out the exact details. The investigators discovered that there had been multiple serious violations of Nestle's own company code on child labour, safety and other issues. 10 years ago, Nestle and other chocolate companies signed a protocol promising to act against child labour. Activists are now impatient at the lack of results.
If this was happening here, we'd do something about it now, today, tonight. This is an intolerable situation to continue for a month longer, a week longer, a night longer for this lad here.
Nestle says it will now monitor all stages of its supply chain, such as in small warehouses like this. During the cocoa harvest, we had no difficulty in finding children at work. Nestle says this goes against everything the company stands for, and tackling child labour has now been...
Than chocolate. See, the U.S. imports about 21% of the world's chocolate, and the average American eats over 11 pounds of it per year. This hardly comes as a surprise, considering how oversized candy bars are stuffed in every vending machine and store counter across America. But you might be surprised to learn that nearly every time you take a bite of that delicious sweetness, you have the hands of a child slave to thank. Yes, you heard me right. And the corporations most responsible for this horrendous practice are Mars, Hershey, and most of all, Nestle. If you're a fan of this show, you probably already know about my disdain for Nestle, which also happens to be the largest purveyor of bottled water worldwide. Because really, who could forget this?
Hello, Abby. I'm Stephanie from Nestle.
Yes, I was lucky enough to receive a personal response from their giant PR department after calling out the company's method of water extraction and privatization. Well, Nestle isn't just sucking up the world's water supply and selling it back to the poor chaps it's stealing it from. The corporation's also known for their chocolate monopoly and the slave labor that goes along with it. Nestle chocolate milk and powder aside, you might be surprised to learn that Nestle is the umbrella corporation that owns some of your favorite candy, including Kit Kat, Butterfinger, Wonka, Milky Way, Chunky, Smarties, 100 Grand, Baby Ruth, and even chocolate power bars. That's by no means an exhaustive list. To many, it's simply unthinkable that rewarding your child's sweet tooth has come at a devastating cost of another child's indentured servitude. Yet Africa's Ivory Coast produces more than half of the planet's chocolate, and the conditions on these cocoa farms there contain some of the world's most abysmal conditions for child workers.
Shocking pictures of children working with machetes and hazardous chemicals. Some said they were held against their will, forced to work, and many told us they never get paid. UNICEF estimates that more than 200,000 children could be involved in some of the worst forms of child labour.
Yes, at least 200,000 children are enslaved on the cocoa farms in the Ivory Coast alone. It's a country with no real laws against human trafficking, and as a result, children are being trafficked or outright stolen from their parents to work on the farms. These kids are around 11 to 15 years old, and many times even younger. According to an in-depth CNN investigation, they are forced to do hard manual labor, 80 to 100 hours a week, and paid absolutely nothing. Most of the children slaving away their lives on the field had never even eaten chocolate and have no idea what the cocoa is even used for. They have machete scars from cutting the brush all day and are severely beaten or even killed if they try to leave. What's perhaps most disturbing is that this is still happening 13 years after Congress passed the Harkin-Engel Protocol, or the Cocoa Protocol, in 2001. The bill called for public reporting by African governments to voluntarily certify that they had ended the practice of child labor. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Today, human rights organizations report that some of the provisions still haven't been met. And no surprise, it's the biggest corporations who refuse to comply. But according to former CEO of Nestle, Peter Brabeck, the Ivory Coast would be worse off if Nestle weren't doing business there. That's the same guy that said water isn't a universal human right. So, what can we do to still fill our chocolate cravings without the guilt of knowing it's helping perpetuate the slave trade? Well, according to Washington Post, luckily there are several certifications on chocolate labels that indicate a slavery-free supply chain, including Fair Trade, Equal Exchange, and Rainforest Alliance. But ultimately, it's up to us, the consumers, to stop funding this practice, because I don't think protecting children is at the top of Nestle's priority list.